Hi, everyone. It's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm excited to tell you that my book is now for sale. It's called Divorcing Religion, a memoir and survival handbook. And I'll make sure you have a link in the notes for that. And also, I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and become a member of my YouTube channel. Take care. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. My guest today is Jamin Coller. And if you got rapture anxiety after watching the 1970s Christian cult movie, A Thief in the Night, you've already met Jamin's dad. As a seminary graduate, pastor's kid, and true believer, Jamin spent his first 40 years as a Bible scholar, theologian, worship pastor, national children's speaker, and Christian educator. But the inconsistencies and discoveries mounted too high, and now he's listing the doubts and truths that pastors aren't supposed to admit they have, the uncomfortable truths that so-called spiritual authorities consciously ignore, oversimplify, and lie about. Jamin's first book was written to the evangelical church. Dear Evangelicals, the real reasons people are exiting the church. His most recent book is called If I'm Really Honest, the transparent thought life of a reluctant deconstructionist. Sounds like good stuff. Welcome, Jamin.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to see you. So glad that you reached out to me to share a little bit about your own journey and the things that you've been working on. And then as soon as I watched some of your videos online, and I saw you in this incredible studio that you're in right now, so surrounded by musical objects and musicians, I thought, boy, I do want to get to know this person, find out a little bit more about your story. So thanks for reaching out in the first place.
Yeah, thank you. So to get a little bit into my story, like you mentioned, my dad was in that movie. That if you were a serious Christian at the time in the late 80s, late or early 80s, then you saw it, and it was probably from what I hear, it was pretty traumatizing for a lot of people. For me, it was. That was like. It was just a given that all the stuff that was in that movie was real, and like that was the jumping off point for all the more traumatizing ideas than that. So it's always funny for me now looking back, because it never really occurred to me like, yeah, my dad was in a movie or whatever, and yeah, it had to do with the rapture and how people are going to be tormented in hell forever and that you're going to be left alone, and and so I grew up like I think a lot of people had this, but it never occurred to me as weird that like if I ever came home or was home, or if I ever couldn't find my parents for 5 minutes or more, there was a chance that was the sign that I was going to hell. And that's like just the way that I lived for all those years. And so that was just kind of like a given, like, one day I'm going to find out, either I'm going to be raptured or everyone else is going to be raptured. And so, yeah, there's a lot of prayer that goes on during that 6th minute when you're like, wait, where are mom and dad? I feel like I should know where they are. And then of course, every time it ends up that you're not raptured, and you rededicate your life to God because you realize how terrible this is going to be if you're left behind and all that stuff. So anyway, that was good, like a normal, like every now and then you wonder if everyone else was raptured. Also, you have lunch every day, like it's just part of your life. And so it's always funny for me to hear, like, now, not funny, but like interesting for me to hear other people like, yeah, I watched that movie and my life was never the same. Like, yeah, I guess probably that's the appropriate way to take that movie.
And your dad was the piano player in the movie, right?
Essentially, he was the same character in the movie that he was in real life. He wasn't really acting there. He was a piano playing preacher, a guy who told all his friends that they were going to go to hell, and lived peacefully and happily, knowing that he was going to be raptured. And then he did get raptured, and minus the last part where he did get raptured, all that stuff is just his regular life. So
wow. So you grew up believing those same things that the terrifying movie um, espoused. Like you believe them that they were literal, that God's word, I got my air
Yeah.
quotes, the Bible was literal
Right.
and true and inerrant, and
Yeah.
your parents really indoctrinated you, programmed you from an early age to believe those things were true as well.
Yeah, I mean, those are prejudicial terms. That we would have said educated
Mhm.
instead of indoctrinated, because indoctrinated makes it sound bad. But yeah, absolutely, indoctrinated. However you wanted to say that. That was the world that I lived in. So it didn't feel like, and we spent. Like you said, I went to seminary and all that stuff. I was a worship pastor and children's pastor for decades. Like that was reality to us. And so we not only were we fortunate to know the truth, that this was all literally real, but it was our life's mission to be here and to impose, again, a prejudicial term, but impose that worldview on other people and help them see the reality of, the rapture. The rapture got less popular, as because in the 70s, like it was supposed to happen like tomorrow, and that was kind of the point of the
Mhm.
movie. Was like, we don't even know if this movie's going to come out before the rapture happens. This is how imminent it is. Phew. Okay,
Wow.
the movie came out. Now a lot of people are going to get saved, and then it gets to be like the mid 80s, and then the late 80s, and the early 90s, and it's like, oh, this thing still hasn't happened yet, but it's still definitely coming. And then it's like resurgence with the Left Behind book series and the movies and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And that was kind of like more, I don't know, it felt to me kind of like Harry Potter-ish. Like it didn't, it was just a trend that everyone was following, and people weren't really living as if the rapture was about to happen, because it'd been several decades since it was a reboot of an
Mhm.
early idea. So we didn't, like, the real Christians didn't take the Left Behind series seriously. Those people were, they had a good message, but it wasn't quite scary enough, because if, again, in all fairness, if this is real and the rapture really is happening, and people are, millions of people are going to be gone, and then the rest of them are all destined for hell. That's that's the most important message that there is to spread, and so we took
Right.
it that seriously.
And the people who didn't believe it were the children and the teenagers who didn't have the ability to think critically and evaluate the claims that their parents were making, their pastors were making, the
Yeah,
movie was making. I mean, my siblings and I saw it probably when we were like 7 to
yeah, okay,
11 years old, of course, at our local Pentecostal church.
right.
And then it sounds like your life was filled with all things Gothard, your schooling, the way that you were educated. And that's a whole different thing. That has a lot of culty elements as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and I mean, there's more names than that. But whatever religious cults Christian documentary you watch, whatever the big names were there, like there was, a lot of that, because really those are all um, just natural outgrowths of the belief that the Bible is literally true, and that you understand how to interpret it. If you start there, you end up with, of course, the Rapture movies and Left Behind and Bill Gothard and all kinds of other stuff that individually could wreck a whole bunch of people's lives. But they were all just kind of like, yeah, these are good Christians. So yeah, you could do the Bill Gothard thing, or you could do the whatever else thing. But as long as you're really strict about making sure that you're living a holy life, and you're taking the Bible literally, and your mission here seriously, then it doesn't really matter what cult you're a part of at that point. You're just a good
Wow.
Christian.
And yeah, that's, I remember. So your dad then started his own church, which, he could enforce his own rules and ideas about. And it sounds like it was fairly, I don't know if repressive, I don't know, all encompassing. There would be no escape for you because you were growing up in the home and then with the same schooling.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was a tough thing to go through, but you didn't know any different. That was all that you knew.
That is the magic of it. Yeah, that's the beautiful, horrific part, is that it's just regular life when you're in it, and you don't realize the tics that you're developing, the traumatic reactions that you're instilling in the rest of your life. While you're in it, it's just life, and you're getting through life. So I'm grateful for, let's see here, all the protective mechanisms that I developed that did me, that served me well during the time. And now it's taken a lot of work to dig those out, to take them out, because they don't serve me anymore. But yeah, it was just regular life. And also to give a little bit more perspective to people who have been out for a longer, or who were never in. Like the concept, going back to my dad and like his church and stuff, the concept that like he was free to teach whatever he wanted and like impose his will on people is definitely 99% true. Also, I think that was all entirely subconscious. He would have denied that with a clear conscience. And all of us would have, and we all did the same thing to various degrees. He was at the top. He had, more power than the rest of us. But if you were unfortunate enough to have me as your mentor and not him as your mentor, then I'm the one who traumatized you the most, and he didn't really play a role in your life. So we all did plenty of damage on our own. But it was all with the same attitude of just like, well, I have the Bible and the Bible's true, and I'm a good Christian, and I know the answers, and you've got problems. And so let me fix your life, because I can. And if you're the kind of person who that is an attractive message to, a compelling message, then now we're in a cult, because you asked me to change your life. You've given me power over your life, and I've accepted that power. And that's where relationships of all kinds, not just religious, turn into cults, in my perspective.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate way to put it. And you did all the things that were expected of you. You were obedient. You were studious. You went to Bible college. You married someone that you had known for a long time. So you were following the steps you were expected to follow. And yet now here you are all these years later, and things look quite different for you. So fill in some of the things in there, some of the steps and things that happened, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Sure. I mean, I can't help but like my parents, my family, my brother live with me frequently in my thoughts. So as you're describing how compliant and good I was, I can't help but hear their voices of like, no, Jamin was always a problem. And it's funny because if you're anyone except for us, looking into our bubble, Jamin is exactly all the things that you said, compliant and good and doing all the stuff he's supposed to do. And he's a Christian, and there's like, he's fully bought into the cult. If you're in the cult, those minor degrees of separation up at the top are huge. So all those things that you said, all of us would agree apply to my brother and my parents. Jamin's always been a problem because Jamin always had this thing where like, he wouldn't just shut up and take it. Like he was just really annoying. Like, we've given you the truth. The truth is in the Bible. And so this is how we're going to live. And this is what we're going to say makes sense. And any part of it that doesn't make sense, we're just going to call that faith. And then we're still going to believe it just as strongly. And we're not going to ask any questions. And Jamin is just a pain in the butt because Jamin keeps going, but that doesn't make sense. I'll do it. And so that's why Jamin looks compliant from the outside. But also on the inside, he's like, does anybody else think this is weird? No? We're just going with this. And so like, as far as like how I got out, or however you want to put that, like, I feel like that was inevitable to some extent, just because I couldn't shut down my brain for long enough that sounds really condescending, because I'm not saying they did turn off their brain, even though it might be true. But there was just something in me that like I needed to be more honest with myself. I couldn't shut up those parts. And so in 2019, shortly before anyone was saying the word COVID, I left the church. It went horribly. And I was, kicked out of the church and family, left lost all the friends that I had and stuff in, just crazy, insane messiness that's got its own million words on my blog, almostaCult.com. And so that whole mess left me socially, psychologically, existentially alone. And I was pretty much done with Earth. Like, I did my best after 40 years of honestly trying to do the right thing. I ended up at the very bottom and still falling. Like, it was just getting worse. And so, at that point, when I decided I was going to continue on Earth, I kind of decided, well, there's a bunch of stuff that I haven't been really honest about, or haven't been persistent about following up on the answers to this stuff, because I knew how much I would lose. I would lose my job, and I would lose my house, and I would lose my car, and I'd lose my friends, I'd lose my family, I'd lose everything was tied up in this, cult, for lack of a better term. And so once all that stuff was gone anyway, I was like, all right, what are the actual answers to these questions that I've not been asking? And so that was originally, like you said, that book was entitled Dear Evangelicals. It wasn't even a book. It was just letters that I sent out to my friends. And then when I didn't get any answers back from them, either because they were shunning me or because they didn't have answers, I kept trying to ask higher and higher people in the religion. Like, what about the person who's over you? Do they have the answer to this question? And so once I started publishing them online, start researching, because I thought I was sure that what I had been told by the cult, by my group, was true. And that was, Jamin, you're just prideful, you're just ignorant, you're just there. All these questions have answers, and you're just basically not a good enough Christian to accept all the right answers. But they're all out there, and there's smarter people than you. Who do you think you are to question these things? You don't think that, and then you name all the apologists, who are like, these people have studied this for their whole lives, and they became Christians after studying these things. How is it you think that you, in all of your wisdom, you're going to come up with some question that no one's thought of before and prove that God doesn't exist? I'm like, I don't want to prove that God doesn't exist. I just want an answer to this question. Anyway, so I had accepted that. So I fully expected, all right, when I finally go out and look for these legitimately, I'm going to get all the answers. I'm going to know that, and I'm going to come back to my original Christianity. Well, of course, I'm talking with you, two people who've also been through that. So we all know that's not what happens. So those questions kept mounting. And so the book was, Dear Evangelicals, please give me answers to these questions. But as that list kept growing, then I realized any evangelical who takes one glance at this book is going to go, oh, I get it, this guy's not a Christian, and not read any further. So it's not really, my audience isn't really evangelicals at that point. And so then that book turned into If I'm Really Honest. So that was actually the first one that got published, even though I wasn't intending to write it. And so that's the longer one that's just like, you know what, if you're starting down the deconstructionist road, here's a bunch of stuff you're probably going to run into. And so here's all the stuff that I ran into at the moment. Of course, the list keeps on growing. But after that, I really wanted to, if we really want to be embarrassingly honest about it, the next book, Dear Evangelicals, is probably some subconscious plea to my former friends and family. Please accept me, even though I can't bring myself to say that I believe things that I don't actually believe. What I would like to think it is something less infantile than that, or less whatever. I'd like to think that it is an invitation to fundamentalist, evangelical, super Christians who don't understand the experience of the people who, who leave the church, essentially, because I think the church sees that as well, you obviously are leaving the church because you want to follow your own sinful desires, or because you're just mad at the church and God for the imperfect humans that make up the church, or all these reasons that we give people that mean the problem doesn't have anything to do with me or my beliefs or my church. The problem is you. And
or you were
dismisses,
never a Christian in the first place.
that's the favorite.
That's one I get.
Uh-huh. Yes. Or the even more insane, you still are a Christian, and like that one I still don't get. Like, well, anyway. I feel like anyone who's been an atheist and told more than one Christian that they're an atheist, they've been told that they're not an atheist. Like, oh, there's no such thing as atheists and foxholes. All right. Anyway, yeah. We all agree there's lots of insane things that the church says to Christians, and I think it's probably a subconscious or a conscious desire to make sure that your existential crisis, your faith crisis, doesn't impact my certainty, because
Totally.
this is a good thing that I've got going here, and I can't afford to look at the things that you're looking at.
Yeah,
So,
I felt like when I left and I didn't hear from many people when I just stopped
Yep.
going to church. And so for me, it was massive and huge. And I was so distraught. And I wasn't hearing from people that I hoped or expected I might hear from. And I came to the conclusion that they feared apostasy. My apostasy might be contagious to them. And so they didn't want to pull on that thread in case their own faith started to unravel. I think that's what it's like for a lot of people. But for you, when you left the church, which was your dad's congregation, everything fell apart, and then they didn't want to talk to you anymore. And this is a huge shunning is such a terrible, terrible issue. It can be deadly in a lot of cases. It's really, really hard to deal with when you lose your entire support network. Now you are married and you do have kids as well. So that part of your life stayed together, but everything else just kind of dissolved.
Yeah, I mean, to say it stayed together is generous. I mean, it's been extremely rough. There have been times we didn't know what parts of that would make it through. So yeah, and ultimately that was I mean, the kids were that's probably a really common story. The kids were finally the thing that was like, all right, well, we got these creatures on the earth, so what's gonna be best for them? So I was grateful to have that anchor there, that responsibility there. But yeah, I don't know how I made it through, and I don't know how other people will make it through. If the faith crisis is big enough, if it's involved enough, if you really believed it, then it's going to be bad news.
And I don't know if this was anything that you had to deal with, but it took me a while to come to terms with. First, I was worried that my turning away might cause my children to go to hell. That was a fear, definite fear that I had. And then I remember getting to the point where I felt confident in saying, I don't even think there is a hell. I don't believe that at all. And that felt really nice. But then I got to a point where I went, wait a minute, if that part's not real, then maybe there's no heaven either. And that was the existential crisis for me when I got to that point.
Yeah. Well, I don't put that in my Dear Evangelicals book because, again, it's just addressed to evangelicals. So I work really hard to tiptoe around the pillars of the religion and just convey the deconstruction experience so that they can see that. But I'll say that in talking to deconstructionists, that I feel like that is most commonly the last piece to fall is hell. Like a lot of people will stay in church for a long time, even past the point where they even believe that Jesus was a real person who lived on earth. But if hell's real, like there's just, it's a really sticky idea. And I think partially because of what you're saying there too. Because like, well, if I don't have hell, then there is not. Well, first of all, there's not justice for
Yes,
all
that's a
truly
huge
evil
one.
people, and
Hmm.
I can't bear to think of that, especially when I know people who deserve hell, and I've been looking forward to them being in hell. And again, these are not things you say out loud, but
Right.
that is the feeling of like there has to be a hell. Like I really need hell, not for me, but for someone else. And then, of course, the not being heaven. Like as a pastor's kid, I've been to at least dozens, but probably hundreds of funerals, and they all have two themes. One is for the person we've decided was a Christian is now in heaven, and we are not allowed to be sad there because that's selfish. How dare you be sad about them being forever happy? So it's like, just wait a second and you're going to be with them again. Like, this isn't a real problem. And so you take all that grief and stuff and just like push it away, because there's no reason for the grief. If you're not singing the happy songs with a smile on your face, and if the tears aren't happy tears for them, you're doing it wrong. You're not really a good Christian.
Wow.
So that's one type of funeral. And then the other type of funeral is, of course, for the damned. And so, probably there's going to be a lot more non-Christians at that funeral, which is great because that's an opportunity for them to get saved, regardless of the wishes of the person who was actually deceased. And so you tiptoe around their eternal destiny. But at the end, you're going to throw in, this makes us all think about what's going to happen to us in the afterlife. And if you want to give your life to Christ, then you can. And then it turns into an altar call for the atheist person who would have never wanted that at their funeral. So those are the two that you get. And so all of the heaven and the hell are the ultimate controlling factors. I think if you keep that in mind as you read through the Bible, then it becomes evident. I mean, a lot of Paul's writing is just like, shut up and take it, because in a second it's all going to be better, and we're all going to get crowns. I mean, it's really materialistic to me.
Yeah.
Currently in my current state, as I read through it, when he talks about the crowns of righteousness and like all the rewards that you're going to get, like, oh, this is just, we're all just trying to get this a bigger mansion just up there instead of down here. So yeah, heaven and hell are pernicious for sure.
Wow. And so lots of people reach out to me who say they got married as believers and now they no longer believe, but they are not sure then what to teach their children or how to teach their children. Or, of course, the big one, well, where do atheists get their morals? Is that something that you struggled with as well? Or, I mean, do you guys talk about it, or you just don't talk about it? Like, some people just want to pretend that none of those things in my old life ever actually happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my kids were ages, let's see here, I'm going to say about 4 to 10 at that time. And so they knew my parents and my brother. They knew everyone, like that. That was their world too.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, all of a sudden, like one day we had to sit them down one night and be like, hey, Mama and Papa, we're not going to see them for maybe forever. We don't know how long. And your uncle and your aunt and your other uncle and your other aunt and these other people who you don't know aren't actually your uncles and aunts, but because you've been calling them that, like this family, this cult, this enmeshed community, we're not really welcome there anymore. So there's definitely some some therapy bills coming for that one. Because that was a big deal. So I don't know that I don't feel like we have the option to not address it. But I definitely wonder too, because I don't even know what the answers are for me. And so then, but here's the fun part is, in my previous worldview, my job was to, we would say, indoctrinate. I would have said teach my children, raise them in the way they should go. So when they are old, they will not depart from it, as the Bible says. So like that was my job, was to make sure their brains are going to stay saved no matter what. Now that's not my responsibility. And so I don't feel the responsibility to give them the right answers. And I do feel the responsibility to protect them from the idea that they will, the people who claim to have the right answers actually have them. And so that's kind of the tack that we're taking at the moment, is just like here's some of the reasons that this thing doesn't make sense to me. So this particular version of certainty, it doesn't make sense to me for this reason. But also, I mean, we do the same thing with the other, Mormonism and Scientology, and my kids have friends from all kinds of different religions, and it's like, oh yeah, well, there's lots of really great stuff in that. Dianetics might really help you, and it's good to be honest and confess your sins to each other. Also, you probably don't need to go and do that e-meter thing and sell your soul to them. So I don't feel like Christianity is different from the other religions in that sense, except that it's definitely more ubiquitous in America. So they have more Christian friends than any other religion, probably. But
wow.
I don't know.
And so they then, have you guys homeschooled your kids, or are they in public school? Or these are all different steps people have to navigate when they're coming out of a very fundamentalist background. And I also homeschooled my kids, and then they went from that into Christian school. And then eventually, as I was loosening my, death grip stranglehold that I had on them as a very controlling religious parent, then I put them in public school. But it wasn't for me just an overnight thing. It happened over time.
Right. Yeah. The schooling's been an interesting one. So originally there was a school that was at the church. I taught there for 10 years. And we were accredited and stuff. It was extremely Christian. And so that was like the only good place to go. There were other Christian schools in our area, but they weren't really as Christian as we were. We were the good Christian school. And then there were other, much worse options. So that was the best option. And then if you were homeschooling your kids, it's interesting because I was homeschooled up through 11th grade because that was God's the best way. But then when my mom took over the school, that school became the best way, probably because she didn't have time to homeschool us anymore. So God changed his mind or something. I don't know. Whatever. So we went to her school, and then that was like the only responsible way to raise your kids. And so all the church people had all the committed church people, all the good church people had their kids in that school, and we had our kids in that school. And then if you were going to homeschool, that was really risky. Like you don't know theology well enough to teach your kids. You should really hand them over to us. And also, you're probably not smart enough, and just let us. You're not qualified for that. And so then when we started planning, because we spent about 3 to 5 years getting ready for this explosion. When we finally decided we're out, we were still both employed by the church and school, and we had our loans through the family, and so it was literally our entire lives, our cars, houses, everything that we had was all tied up in that. So we spent a good 3 to 5 years trying to disentangle ourselves from that, and paying off the cars, and then getting ready to sell the house and all that stuff, so that when this all went as badly as we thought it would, again, it went much worse, but when it went as badly as we thought it would, they wouldn't be able to take all of our livelihood away from us. So I got a different job and stuff, and in every step of the way, when I said, hey, I'm gonna not work at the school anymore, I'm gonna do something else, it was like, oh, so you don't love Jesus anymore? And so it was every step of the way, it was really hard conversations about Jamin's soul. And again, this is why Jamin's he was never cut out for ministry. Obviously, he wanted to work in a different job. He didn't want to work in the ministry. Anyway, so we started disentangling ourselves from that, and I have now lost the thread of the question. I'm sorry.
Oh, I think it was about schooling, but I love this rabbit hole that you've taken us down about preparing for the loss of everything.
Yes, right. So part of that was getting ready to take the kids out of the school, because that was going to be the last one. Because if we take the kids out of the school, then we're like, well, then obviously you don't want to be a part of the ministry. And so that was going to be the last step. So when we told them that we were going to homeschool our kids, my dad came over and like had a, real like a why he like if he could have called CPS on me, he would have.
Wow.
He was like, you understand you're wrecking your kids. Like, just I want to hear you say that as my son, that you want to wreck my grandchildren. Like, no, Dad, I just don't see the world the same as you, but I understand that's the way you feel about it. And so they were really, depressing conversations to have in that way. So yeah, we pulled them out and we started homeschooling them. And we did that for up until this last year. I think was the first year that some of them have gone. There's a couple that are in a charter, like a, I don't know even what it is. It's a small public school, charter school. And then there's one that's at a Montessori, and there's 3 of them that are homeschooled still. So every year, we think that every year we've kind of reassessed and gone, what do the individual kids actually need? What's a good fit for them? Some of them are really heavily involved in dance, and if they had a regular school schedule, they wouldn't be able to do that. And so for some of them, it's like an accommodation of their other passions and stuff. But I'm also open to the idea that we still have a lot of latent distrust of the public education system and stuff like that. So I don't really know what all my motivations are, but I know that we're trying to be honest as we possibly can about it and reassess what each kid needs.
Yeah, wow. I mean, hats off to you, because you guys have really been thinking things through, and you're doing it with thought, this idea of disentangling yourselves from everything. And the kids obviously also, our children pay the price for the decisions that we make. That's just part of the deal. So some of the kids are involved heavily in extracurricular activities, and that goes along with, I wanted to ask you about community, because you lost your entire community, including family. How did you begin that rebuilding process? Did you move away to another town and kind of got somewhere where nobody knew your background? And so then you're free to just start, meeting people as you are, instead of the preconceived notions they might have had about you. What did you guys do for building community after?
Yeah. So in that 3 to 5 year preparing period that we had, my wife was making like homeschool community connections and stuff. So we had a couple friends that were not in our church, which was not allowed, but we didn't talk about it. And they wouldn't have said it's not allowed, but it's not allowed. And we also got like babysitters from like that were not Christian people, like off of like websites and stuff like that. And that was like the fact that we were not depending on them to take care of, because the right way to do it is, if you needed a babysitter, you were supposed to essentially tell my mom, and then she was going to figure out who in the church it was that she was going to take care of their kids so they could take care of their kids, and they were going to come babysit for you. And there's, it's a free babysitter, and we just do it because we love each other. And also, in the back of your mind, now you owe the system. So when they call for you, you've got to make your adjustments. Okay, so you're going to come watch my kids so I can go do the, and so it was this whole web. And so then when we started like we tried to not let people know that we were like going out with each other on a date or something, because we didn't want them to know that there was another babysitter at our house who was not part of the web. So anyway, disentangling was complicated. So we were, we were getting, man, again, I've lost the thread of the question.
Oh, community.
Thank you. Community. Yes.
Yeah.
So then she was building community outside of that group. And so my kids started like spending time with the like homeschool co-ops and stuff like that that she was a part of. And then we moved. The plan was we were going to move to this other city that's about 45 minutes away from there. And so we were just going to say, love you guys. We understand that you can't hear that, but we do, and we don't see the world the same way as you. We're going away, and we would be off on our own. But the Christian pastor community is a connected one. And so what we ended up doing was every church we would go to, of course, when we left, there were, think of all the worst, hideous rumors that you could imagine creating about someone, and those are the stories that you'll still hear about me if you go and ask the people from that community. There's pretty much just my parents at this point. But anyway, so I knew that the narrative that was in this area, we had moved up here and we started going to churches. And so I would, like meet the pastor after church, and he'd be like, "What's your name?" And I'm like, "Jamin Coller." He's like, "Oh, your dad's Dwayne." I'm like, "Oh, crap." Is, and we're not going here. And so it was really hard to find a church that hadn't heard already, or there were several of them that were in like the worship pastor, like the whole staff. It was like they had gotten the memo, like wanted dead or alive, Jamin Coller, here's the list of his sins. And so there were several of them when like I was like, "Hey, I'm Jamin." They're like, "Oh, hi, I'm glad that you came today." Like, oh crap. You can just see it in their eyes. And so anyway, we ended up not really being able to find a church that we could attend where they didn't already have a idea of what our list of sins was. And then so my wife had her community. I didn't really have any. I started going to a Bible study that was full of, really good, nice guys, and it's a Bible study. So the the premise of the thing is this is the inspired, inerrant, infallible Word of God, and all the words are literally true. And I'm not in the space. Like, I'm just trying to stay on the planet. I'm not in the space to like deconstruct theologically all that crap. Like, I need some humans that don't throw me out of the room. And here's 6 guys that won't throw me out of the room. And so I'll go every week and I'll read the Bible and do whatever we got to do. So that was the beginning of my community, was just like, list for me anyone who doesn't hate me. I like went through my contact list and like came up with like 150 people of like, these people might respond to me. These others, I know they will. I already know. They've already told me what they think of me. Here's 150 people that I think might respond to me. I texted them each individually, just like "Hey, what's up? I miss you. I'm hoping that you're doing well and that we could go grab coffee sometime." Out of that, several of them responded with my list of sins and why they wouldn't meet with me. 3 people hadn't heard of my sins and were willing to meet with me. So I was really, really low on community. So it was that Bible study at the beginning and these 3 people that responded to me. And then after a while, like I just wasn't, the Bible study wasn't really cutting it for me. There are not real deep connections that I was able to form with any of them, because we had, different worldviews and different premise of why we were there. So I started this other thing. I was just like, all right, so if I can imagine the community I wanted, what would it look like? And I kind of wrote out a list, and then I just like sent that out into the universe of like, hey, if this sounds interesting to you, essentially I was starting my own cult. Was what was happening. And I was slightly aware of it, but I was also desperate enough that it didn't matter. Like, are there other humans who will, we can listen to each other and listen to each other's opinions without fixing each other? Like, and so all the rules, it's funny to like read back through like the group rules, because they all have to do with like, you're not allowed to interject your ideas and your thoughts into someone else's life. And so it was basically like an AA meeting, but without the alcohol. And so I did that and formed some really great connections that I've kept to today. So it's kind of been like, attend a group and then like, I connect with this person and then, make this group and then I connect with these people. So it's been very piecemeal. It's not like I found another place where I just like, oh, I went to the gym and then that replaced all my community. It's like, here and there, 1 or 2 people I can connect with. And usually I find that the connections are made easiest with other people who are open to letting other people live their life without needing to fix them. So, and that's not tied necessarily to a religion. A couple of them are Christians, and they don't think that I am a Christian, and they're not trying to fix that. We just have an understanding. So it's not like in my experience, all Christians are bad, but all people who are certain that you need their truth, pretty much all those people are not going to be candidates for long-term, deeper relationships. And that's sad because some of them I really wanted them to be, it's like, I really wish this person was my friend, but also there's a certain format your life needs to fit in order for them to be able to have you that close to their life for all the reasons that we've already said.
Yeah. I know you mentioned a website that you have. What is it almost called? What's the name of the website?
Yes, almostacult.com.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's not a little bit to say about it, but let's see here. We can get started. So that is essentially, so January 15th was the day I decided I was going to stay on the planet one more day. And then I was going to make a decision the next day. And I was going to make a decision the next day. And we just kept pushing it off for 24 hours. And so at that point, it didn't start with theology. I didn't even know I had a theology problem. I just had a Jamin problem. Like, I don't even know what the things are. I've tried to be honest with myself through all this is me, what I'm thinking at the time. I've tried to be honest with myself, but I don't even know what things I've lied to myself about. And I wasn't even aware of it. I in that group of no rebels allowed, I was 99% compliant, but that 1%, I don't know what's hidden in there. I don't know what I've lied to myself about. So let's pretend that you did die tonight and that there's no price to be paid for honesty. So what do you actually remember about your life? And I started writing out. It was just a big, long timeline. It was, I forget how many, it was like 1,500 events. Like every event that I could remember, I wrote down and I tried to put in chronologically. This is not recommended. I don't even know where I got the idea, but it was just like I had to somehow take the chaos and the uncertainty and nail it down to the ground. And so I make this whole big long list, and I'm kind of looking at it like, what's the theme here? Who is this guy that I'm describing? And so that was a lot of those were just like a sentence, and I knew there was a deep story behind it, and I wasn't ready to get into that story. And so I had 1,500 stories essentially of here was a major event. I know I had really strong feelings about that. On to the next. And so from birth up until now. And so then I started going back and okay, so let's take these on one at a time. What actually happened here? What do you think that you remember happening here? And then I would go research it and diving into newspaper archives and whatever I could, just I need to know what actually happened in my life. And so that was just my own personal journaling of honestly, a lot of the stuff is really dark, but in all honesty, it was the thing that kept me alive, because it was I need to be able to hand my kids, here's the effed up guy that your dad was, before I die. And so once I'm finished writing out all these stories, then I can die and I finish this thing. So it was kind of like this, every time I got that real urge to this is stupid, this is pointless, let's end it. Okay, we can end it as soon as you get to the end. We got to get to the end. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of those stories, I spent my life was the church. And so, and there were thousands of people who got chewed up and spit out by that machine, who have all been on their own various stages and journeys of recovery or not, bitterness and suicide in some cases, and the whole spectrum of how do you respond to having been a part of this kind of a cultish relationship in this type of machine. And so I kind of felt well, I'm writing this really for my kids. I'm writing this so I know what I can hand my kids. And then also there's these other people who were gaslit for decades, 20 years later, they're still like harping on, okay, but they told me this wasn't true. And I know this is true. This is true, right? And I would meet with them, and like it was still as alive in their eyes as the moment that it happened 20 years ago. And they're like, is this what happened? Tell me this is what happened. And so I kind of realized after a few of those reconnections, like there's a whole lot of people out there that just need to know, yeah, this place was screwed up, and here are the ways it was screwed up. So I decided this thing that I was writing to keep myself alive, or to whatever, or to give to my kids, really should be something that those people had access to. So I opened that up on a blog so that people could just come read, and it's way more than anyone should ever have to read. But a lot of people have read all of it, especially if they were really involved, because a lot of cases, they just shut that part of their life off. Like, I don't know, I was in something and it was crazy, but I moved to Texas and now I'm not thinking about that anymore. And so then they're like, oh, Jamin is writing about his experience. Okay, well, yeah, let's get into it. And so it's kind of like opened up that for them. So that's not necessarily like, it's for whoever wants to read it. If you can get something out of it, then cool. But it was not written for you. It was written for me, because I needed to know what was happening. So I think what happened was I finished. There's a part in there that gets like really, really ugly, that we communicate with this child therapist here in our area, that we were like, and she said, you know what, you probably shouldn't publish that stuff, because if someone got a hold of that and then sent it to your kids, that could be really traumatizing. So you can publish up until this point, but I would highly recommend don't publish, this window of stuff until your kids are a lot older. So there's a small window of stuff in there that won't be published until after the kids are a little bit older. But yeah, that was I kind of completed that. And like I put the period on the last one. I was like, I think that's as true, as honest as I can get about everything that's ever happened to me. And it's embarrassing, but whatever. I was going to die anyway. So like, it's not like every moment right now is a bonus moment. So like, who cares if like someone reads something and it's an embarrassing memory for me, like whatever, I was dead anyway. You have at it. When I finished that though, that's when the theology stuff set in. And I was like, okay, well, there's all of this. As I was writing, I would run into this, like, I remember when I was this age, I brought up this question, I got this response, it was really weird. And then it would like blossom into like this theology debate inside of my autobiographical thing. I was like, this doesn't really fit. It doesn't have anything to do with Jamin. This is just a theological argument. So I put all those off to the side. Well, when I finished, I brought all those back and I was like, all right, let's take a look at these now. What's going on here? And so then it was just pure theology and not autobiographical at all, even though they were all chronologically ordered in my autobiography. It was kind of autobiographical, but it was essentially my deconstruction story, even though I didn't have that vocabulary at the time. And that's the thing that I was like going to send out and be like, dear evangelicals, please tell me what's going on. And so then that turned into the book, If I'm Really Honest, and that's all theology. And so then finally, after all this vomit of my autobiography, and then all this vomit of the theological stuff, finally I was allowed to like sit back and go, okay, so if I was actually, if I didn't feel like I needed to get all of that out, and I was just talking to an evangelical friend, trying to get them to understand the experience of someone who was involuntarily deconstructing, so they could have compassion on them and have empathy instead of accusing them. What would I say? I don't want to insult their theology and their sacred truths that they're holding, but also there's some humanity here that we're missing. And so that's finally the book, Dear Evangelicals, which is the kindest of all three of those works.
It's amazing. And I think when I was on the site the other day, it looked like there's even an option for people to send the book anonymously to their pastor. I thought that is very, very interesting, and it's the whole thing is very generous of you, even to take the time and put it all together. Your story is just incredible. It's amazing. I'm so glad that you are still here. And it looks like your life keeps going. It's going in a very different direction than you thought it would go in. But you are you've been working to build community, and you have your spouse and your children. Obviously, music still plays a huge part
Right.
of your life. Has music been healing for you? Did you have to step back from music for a time?
That's interesting. The answer is supposed to be yes, because I'm a musician and I'm supposed to, artistic um, answers and stuff. But not until recently was it really a grounding thing. It was a frustrating thing for me when because I was a worship pastor for decades, and I always one of the things that like I really had a hard time with was like the anointing. Because people would tell me I was anointed, and I'm like, no, I've practiced my butt off. Like I made that anointing. That was like, I understand you feel like you were spoken to by God through my music, but I can play in a way that God can't talk to you, and I can play in a way that God can talk to you, and I can do that regardless of what your religious affiliation is, or like where it's a C2, it's like it's a plagal cadence. It's like I've got terms for the thing that you're calling the anointing, and maybe there is an anointing on top of all that, but I can manipulate your emotions without like while being fully atheist. This has nothing to do with God. So it was, while I was in it, there was always a disconnection there between the music and the spirituality, and I voluntarily manipulated their emotions with good intentions so that they could have a spiritual experience. And I think that happened, that they really did have a sacred experience because of what I was doing to them. But there was always this like, if I'm really honest, I can play crappy and wreck the anointing. Why is God's anointing dependent on my music theory knowledge? So there was always this like this thing that like broke apart, and I was distrustful of emotional manipulation, and that I'm sure has a lot to do with my upbringing. But I didn't ever want. I didn't want to reach conclusions in my life because of art, and so I think that disconnection has disabled music from playing as big a role in my own personal healing as it would for other people who were not trying to actively be skeptical about it. So. But recently, I found as I've done mental health work and then physical health work, and gotten wrapped up in more like physical health stuff. When I come back to the piano and I play it, there's definitely something in my soul that's like, this is you belong here. This needs to play some role. Kind of like finally having like a veggie platter after a gallon of ice cream or something like that. There's like there's all this yuckiness, and then there's something that's like, oh, this isn't what you would have grabbed, but this is what you need. And music is that for me. It's very grounding. And the more I'm away from it, when I come back to it, it's like, yep, there's something, and I don't know what it is, but there's something there that I need. So recently, it's played a bigger role than it would have, I think, normally for most people.
I'm so glad for you. I'm so glad to hear that religion robbed you of an awful lot of things. And I'm so just happy for you that you are now at the point that you're at. And thank you for sharing today on this show. It's so hard to just squeeze it down into an hour-long
Right.
conversation so people can buy your books. And is there a way that people can connect with you? I don't know if you're on social media or any links that you give me, I'll put in the show notes. But is there a way that people can reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. There are contact pages on those websites. For mental health reasons, I'm not very much on social media these days. So it'd probably be better for the books if I was, but whatever. Me first. So I'm taking care of my own health first. So so if you go to the websites, if you go to the links, I'm very reachable. I haven't hidden myself at all, but I'm also not on social media. So.
Okay. Well, this was a real pleasure to speak with you and learn about your life. And my God, you are resilient, if nothing else. Just an incredible story that you shared. Thank you so much. And if you ever want to connect in the future or come back, I'd love to have you on again as a guest.
That'd be great. I'd love it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Please take care, and we'll see you again soon.